Teenagers aren't the only ones who are going through life-changing identity throughout the years. As your child grows, your role as a parent changes too. And if you feel like you're someone who gets lost and stuck throughout different periods of your life, this episode is for you, because we're going to break down why your identity tends to shift depending on the age of your kid, how we can help our teenagers and our kids identify where they are in terms of their identity, and some simple principles to make sure you feel like you're keeping up with yourself, to make sure you don't feel lost or unsure about where you are, but you know exactly where you need to be, and how we can make sure we get that mindset exactly where it is. My name is Jordan, I'm a teen mentor, and I've been working with thousands of families over the years. And throughout that time, I've recognized a couple of different things. One of the biggest things I've noticed is actually the parents that come up to me. The parents which turn up with the kids, depending on what age, and I can usually get a pretty good sense of where they're at. The feeling that some of them are quite lost because, quite frankly, their teenagers change a lot. They've gone from being in primary school to high school, or from being in a position where they're being from high school to university. And a lot of the time throughout this, I see the parents struggle to identify where they need to be and where they should feel like they are. Sometimes it's almost like this imposter syndrome which sits around, but here is why I'm going to break it down for you. Because when we look at identity, a lot of the time we look at our teenagers and they're asking, like, who am I? Where do I belong to? What do I like, or where do I sit? But for parents, we're usually asking the questions to them, trying to help them identify the way they are. But we don't ask the questions to the parent, saying, what makes you the parent that you are now? Why is my role as a parent changing throughout this time? And how can I best support my kid? And of course, be able to support myself. We say one of the biggest identity changes as a person is when your kid is born, when you instantly become that mother or that father. But I would argue that that is just the beginning. There are so many more changes which should come along the way. Sure, you have this massive responsibility now, and you really got to figure out how you're going to best prioritize your child at the same time as managing these previous identities of yourself. But as your kids start to grow up, you'll start to understand there's so much more to explore about your internal being, and how we can make sure that we feel like we're giving our kid the right support at the same time is making sure we give them the confidence to keep on pushing through. So if we look at parenting on a very basic level throughout the different years, we're going to notice a couple different changes. I like to call it the hug to arm's reach. And so what I mean by that is when your child is born, you never let them out of your sight. You've got them in your arms, you've got them right in front of you. There's honestly no room for escape for that child. And honestly, for good reason too, because they need a strong protector that's going to be around them all the time. Someone that's going to feed them, someone that's going to coddle them, someone's going to make them feel comforted and rest assured all the time. However, when your kids start to grow up and they start moving through preschool and eventually send them off to primary school, that's when things change a lot, because you're still giving them lots of comfort, lots of support, and you're that person that they just love the most. You're always there. You're always going to be that one they're going to come up to and be like, Mom, Dad, let me show you this. However, they're more about trying to play, about trying to get out there a bit more, trying to explore, but everything is still within arm's reach. Like, you don't necessarily have to have them go too far away. You keep them within eyes distance, and you keep them close, because you're still that protector, slightly less in a way, because you want them to explore and challenge themselves a little bit, but they're not always just by your side. But when it comes to being into a teenager, into high school, that's when things really start shifting a lot, because even though you're that protector for them, that person who's going to try and keep them safe, there's a big part of it where you need to trust that they're going to be okay with other people in the world, with teachers, with coaches, with other friends, with other parents. There are so many people which enter life who we need to be able to trust as well. So we also have that self-awareness, but at the same time, we need to be able to make sure that we have an understanding that for our teenager to continue to grow and develop in the right ways, they need to go and meet other people. They need to talk to people of different ages, and they need to be able to be in a situation where they are going to challenge themselves. Things are going to hurt, things are going to feel uncomfortable, but in the same way, we almost need them to feel that as well, but they must know that they're going to be able to come back to us whenever they want to. So we had this massive shift between being this protector who's always there to someone who lets them out of our sight, lets them spend the whole day somewhere else. And then suddenly we're like, okay, as a parent, like what's my role? I've always been this person who's right with them, and then suddenly they're not there anymore. I have to trust that they're out by themselves. And that is how identity shifts, because suddenly we're this person who has to put a lot more trust in other people. We have to be able to set different boundaries to what we had before. And we also need to start thinking about ourselves, like, I have this extra time, I'm working on different skills, being able to communicate in a different way, being able to start prioritizing my dreams, goals and desires so that I can show them the kind of role model that they need. And also in the same way, you start reinventing yourself in some ways, because for a lot of us, when we have that time, we start going, okay, hold on. Am I allowed to be like a little bit more selfish now so that I can work on my other dreams and my other priorities? Because that's one thing that we tend to miss out on a lot, is the more that we are with the presence of our kids is like, we don't have as much time for all those other things in life, which is why I think it's really important that we start to find almost like a different purpose at times. Like the kids are still going to be there, still number one. But there's also that purpose of like, can me and my partner, can we go traveling? Can we get back into working on our fitness? Can we try a new career and try to figure that out too? It's a huge part of being like growing up, and growing up through the years of our kids growing up too, if that makes sense. So honestly, a lot of the time parents will feel unsettled because there's so much identity attached to the previous kind of part of our kids' life. When they start to go in high school and they've just made this quick change within God knows what feels a blink of an eye, we're still back here in this primary school identity, because we're trying to think, how can we support them like we did here? Because God, it took us a couple of years to figure it out, but like it still works, right? When in fact, we almost have to move on in a way to a whole new person and continue to grow. So we go through this part where we're being a massive problem solver at the very beginning, and now we don't need to problem solve as much, but we also need to be this person who kind of allows autonomy and works more on ourselves. So this comes with a lot of conflict too, because when our teenagers start to become disagreeable, and disagreeable in many ways, where some become more stubborn, some want to push themselves more, and yet we're still that person who's still trying to be that really strong protector, that's where a lot of the conflict comes in. And I'm not saying that we have to like just let them do what they want, because that's a terrible idea. They're going to get themselves seriously hurt. But we do need to understand where the boundaries are for them. Can we free them up a little bit more to do that thing? Do we have to look over them as much, or are we becoming too much of a helicopter parent and less so someone who's going to help guide them? And is it more important that we show them the values of what it's like to be a good person, as to particularly showing them every step of the way? And so I think that's really, really important too, because for teenagers, they need to explore, they need to do all these things, they need to make decisions for themselves to give themselves confidence, understand that they're going to make mistakes and they're going to have setbacks, but they're still going to return to who they are. And so I think that's really, really important. So I think one thing for parents is language shift. Being able to, as time goes on, stop being as specific for certain things, but trying to create a bit more general idea of what's happening. Understand that we say things like, you're learning, you're becoming, all those things, as opposed to saying, you need to do this, you need to do that. That's a big shift as well. Because I find one of the biggest things that parents come to me with is that they say, how's my kid going? He hasn't been doing this one thing he used to do before. I'm like, that's okay. Doesn't enjoy that as much anymore. He's becoming a different person now because they're growing up. I work with this one kid. We'll call him Chad. Okay, I'm not going to use his real name. Call him Chad, and his parents always say to me, like, how's Chad doing? Because Chad is, not hanging around with these friends anymore. He's not doing this sport that he used to play all the time. And I say, yeah, that's actually one thing we've been working on, because those friends he was with have changed and become something else, something that doesn't support him. They're much riskier behaviors, not saying the nicest things to each other. And for Chad, it doesn't seem to align with who he is now, which is this person he's becoming to be, this person who wants to think positively, to work on himself, to focus on his health, his strength, his new sports and things like that. So our parents can get very caught up in the person that our teenagers were as well, which is not to blame because quite frankly, they've seen them thrive in that regard with those kids before. But there's always a transition for our teenagers too. So we need to be okay, to be comfortable with our teenagers transitioning their identity to a different person as well. That's part of their growth. That's how they're going to become, healthier, more resilient human being too. So that's where it comes into identity, is that understanding the identity of our teenager as well as ourselves. So what I want you to start doing from now on is I want you to start asking yourself some questions. Ask yourself, like, in this part of my life, what parent do I need to be? For our teenagers, what kind of parent would they like to see? And also ask yourself, these things that I have been working with with my teenager, my kids, do they need that anymore, or do they need something different? And have these reflective questioning as a way to kind of just check in with yourself. Does this habitual behavior I've been doing, which has served me very well before, is this needed anymore? Is this something I still need to lean into? Or can I let it pass on and I can share this wisdom to someone else along the way, but I don't need this much anymore myself? And then see how we kind of play around, change ourselves, create this new identity for ourselves, and then grow. I'm going to finish with this message. Teenagers aren't the only people who are going through an identity shift. It's important to be self-compassionate for yourself because you are going to go through a lot of changes yourself. And when we allow space for identities to grow and mold and change, we will all start growing together. There'll be times we'll be up, we'll be down, we'll have conflict, we'll have great times. But it's more important that we continue to become something else as opposed to trying to remain stagnant where we were before. That's all a good time for today. Until next time.